All right, folks. We're here at the last talk of Game Devs of Color Expo 2024. It's been a heck of an expo, and it's also been a heck of a day. A lot of nitty gritty, rubber to the road, pedal to the metal, other car metaphor, concrete skills that we've gathered today. How to make sure our game is well designed and marketed, and how to get it off the ground and funded. Now it's time to hear from a team that's done all of those things and more. Now, as a game dev, you have likely heard from one of your non-game dev friends a sentence like this when they were talking about a game that they enjoyed. Well, yeah, it's great. I just wish that I wish they'd just put it on Switch already. I wish they'd just put it on mobile already. And then you, my dear sweet game dev, lifted your eyes to the heaven, understanding that one does not just release on Switch. It's not just release on mobile. It is akin to just adding multiplayer. Multi-platform launch is not simple. And with every platform that you decide to launch on, you have the opportunity for additional players, additional sales, additional energy, but also additional complications. So how do you decide what's best? Our final speakers for the show would like to be able to give you some tips from their own experience. Brian Alvarado and Ricardo Ilescas are from 502 Studios. They developed 502's Arcade, a collection of games released on PS5, PS4, Xbox One, Xbox Series S, Xbox Series X, Switch, and PC. I don't think I missed any. But that's a lot of platforms to launch on. They come to the talk with a lot of really solid, concrete knowledge and takeaways for you to consider, not just in the space of a multi-platform launch, but in launch in general, and how to figure out how to make the right priorities, how to make the right calls, and ways that you can potentially be prepared for additional marketing opportunities and more. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Brian and Ricardo.
Hey all, we're Brian and Ricardo,
Hello.
and we're 502 Studios, and we're here to talk to you a bit about our whole experience releasing our game 502's Arcade. We're gonna have some tips and some precautions you might wanna consider if you wanna do something like this at some point, releasing in a whole bunch of platforms for one of your games. So first of all, why though? We're gonna talk a bit about why we did it and why you might wanna do it. So as many of you know, making games is really hard. Launching games is even harder with all the coordination between several things you have to get just right. So you can imagine what a fun experience is to launch not in one or two platforms, but in 6 different platforms at the same time. But okay, you decided you want to take this challenge on, so some things you might want to consider first. So I think a common assumption is like more platforms could mean more sales. That might be true in some cases, but you have to take into account some things. For example, evaluate which platforms might be a better fit for your game. Every platform has a core audience, and that audience might be expecting or waiting for a specific genre or type of game to play. So if your game is not a good match for them, you might as well not be able to recoup the cost of porting over to that platform. Also, first thing you might want to think about is take your resources into consideration. This meaning time, money, or even people that on your team that has enough time to work on it. We'll get more on this later on. Um, yeah, like I said before, like please take into account your time and budget constraints when deciding if you want to do this. We managed to do this specifically for our team because we have been doing contract work as a company and we have this alternate revenue stream. But if you either have a specific date for release or you're working on a really tight budget, you might want to reconsider if it's worth it or not to release on all these platforms. And also think about the specific goals you want to achieve with this. Is it to increase studio awareness on a specific platform? Are you trying to get a specific deal with a platform? Or do you just want to try to see how hard it is and treat it as a learning experience, for example? You really have to analyze why your team is deciding to do this. And now that you know what the talk is gonna be about, I'm gonna introduce us again. I'm Brian, and together with Ricardo, we've been working in the industry for over a decade now. We started making games when we met in college and decided to found a company as there was no industry at all over here in Guatemala when we started making games. And over the years, we've worked on several different projects, including our own games and games for other companies, going from mobile games to enterprise software, which has given us a wide range of experience to learn from. In these past couple of years, we become a co-development studio. So we're helping other studios to port their games or helping with other technical-oriented tasks. This has been critical for us, not just because it has gave us some sort of financial stability as a studio, but also has exposed us to different practices for project management, working with platforms, integrating specific features, and a lot much more. So now we're going to talk a bit about the game. So, Ricardo.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. So, what's 502's Arcade? Um, it's a small collection of arcade games. The idea was to recreate the feeling of going to an arcade gallery and choose from a wide selection of games. The initial release includes 4 games, each one of a different genre. We have a dungeon crawler set in a coarse Japanese temple, a beat 'em up mixed with tower defense with a pirate theme, a puzzler where you have to match items to create magical potions, and a 2D shooter where you fight off against a lot of bugs using powerful weapons. They are all designed to be played in short or long sessions, and your main goal is to reach the top of the leaderboards, like in a classic arcade game. We initially wanted to work on a small scope game just to get experience releasing for the first time in some platforms. And the concept of making 502's Arcade seemed less complex that other projects that we had in mind. But in the end, we made 4 different games, so no small scope at all. It took around 2 years to complete, in great part due to our contract work and us being a small team. We were a 2-person team for a good part of the development.
Okay, so now that you know what the game is about, we're gonna talk a bit of what we could advise when taking on a project like this for so many platforms. So first of all, I think the biggest takeaway from the talk is plan ahead. When we started the game, we were planning to release it on Steam and Nintendo Switch. And when we were a little bit over half of the development of the game, we somehow decided, let's add Xbox One, Xbox Series, PS4, PS5. So please don't do this. It was probably not such a good decision doing that mid-development. Even though we were lucky enough that we had a little bit of past experience working with all these platforms, even then we got really behind schedule due to several things we should have taken into consideration when adding these new platforms. So try to decide the platforms you're gonna do as soon as you can. Of course, things can change with the time and you will have to adjust accordingly. For example, you get a Game Pass deal that requires you to start porting to Xbox now, but make sure to take that into account even in the negotiations for these kind of things, so you can take the proper time and the proper budget to actually do the ports for all these platforms. And once you have all your platforms settled down, there are some specific things you have to plan for as well. We'll be talking about each one of them a little bit later on, but here's a short list. You have to take into consideration localization for the game, support for specific features in certain platforms, how the certification process works, and how much the certification takes time on each one of them. So these all affect your release in different ways, like the regions where you can release the game, languages that you will support, and how much time should you take into account between finishing the actual game, getting a release candidate, and then get an actual release date for the game. So keep that always in mind, because it could affect the dates depending on how it's going with every one of these platforms.
So let's talk about localization. This depends on your game, but can get expensive really fast. We designed 502's Arcade to use as little text as possible, and even then, the localization took a good amount of our budget. Try to invest in proper localizations. You could do machine translations, but even if they are good, they lack the context needed to have accurate translations, and players will likely complain about them. If you are on a tight budget, at least localize game descriptions for stores. This is probably going to help you release in as many regions as possible. We didn't know this at first, and to date, we still haven't able to release the game in some regions. We will recommend you that you localize at least in English, French, Italian, German, and Spanish, and Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. Of course, this depends on your target audience, and you might have analytics gathered from demos and festivals. So be sure to keep track on those things to be informed enough to make the right choice. Each additional language will increase the cost of your localization. If you plan to localize the game to a few languages, make sure that you set aside some extra time to test the game in all of them. Some languages have really particular long strings, and some of them have really big words that are not easy to break up. So you have to take that into consideration both for your store listings and for your in-game texts. And to finish this, probably the most important point, console platforms are very strict with terminology. So if you use some features like the controller's vibration and you localize those, make sure that you comply with the naming conventions each platform has.
Okay, so now we're gonna talk a little bit about our favorite topic because we're very technically focused. So it's about technical requirements and platform features. If you already know which platforms you're gonna release on, start thinking about what parts of the platform do you want or need to integrate in your game. In our case, for this specific game, we needed to use leaderboards and achievements. So we started to do research on those very early on for each platform. This is a bit tricky because you will think that they all work the same or very similar, but there's really no standard for the implementation of these kind of things. So you have to be aware of those limitations on each platform to plan around those. For example, as part of the technical requirements in most platforms, especially consoles, you have to handle the user authentication for the user playing the game. So make sure to take that into account as well, especially if you're using any platform-specific feature, like the ones we mentioned before, because they all depend on the user being properly signed in at the time you start using them. Another thing to take into account, we strongly recommend it, is to try to keep separate your game code from your platform code. We strongly recommend to use an abstract for all the platform-specific code. That will let you have a more common contract between all of them, even if they behave different internally between each other. To make an example for this, let's say your game just needs to know it has to unlock an achievement, but the game shouldn't care if it's a PlayStation trophy or a Steam achievement. You can just architecture your code to internally decide which platform to use depending on where it's running. So we mostly use Unity, but this is a practice you probably can apply to any of the major engines. And that takes me to another thing that is very important, that is handling input. We use Unity for our game, and fortunately, we find an asset called in control that supports all the platforms and different configurations that we needed. But there might be similar assets available in most of the widely used engines. This was especially helpful in platforms like Steam or Nintendo Switch, for example, because we needed different controller configurations for them between the Joy-Cons, the Pro controllers, playing with mouse and keyboard, and that sort of thing. Another thing that it's very platform specific, it's saving and loading. All the platforms differ on how they handle this. This can get particularly complicated if you throw a cloud saving in there, which some platforms do without friction, but others might need some additional setup on your side. And very important, always keep an eye on performance, especially so in platforms like the Nintendo Switch or older generations like the Xbox One S or the PS4. which might struggle on certain areas of your game. Optimizing your game is always a good practice, but when you're releasing on so many different platforms, it's a must. So always keep an eye on that. And talking about optimizing, it's very important also that you get familiarized with how all the testing environments work. You eventually have to test the games on the actual dev kits, not just in your engine editor. So make sure you know how to create test accounts, test sandboxes, how to configure everything you need there, like achievements, leaderboard, on anything else that the platform might need to provide for the game. And talking about testing, certification and testing, it's probably one of the core things you have to focus when trying to get a multi-platform release out. Pretty much all platforms have some sort of form or another of a technical requirement checklist. So once you get access to all the documentation for them, look for it. This is probably the thing you'll have to pay the more attention when working on the ports, as failing on those requirements could get your submission rejected, and you'll have to make changes closer to your release date, which, believe me, you don't want to do. It's very stressful, especially if you already announced your release date. Yes, that happened to us, and it was a nightmare of 2 weeks. You don't want to do that, so pay attention to that very early on and test as frequently as you can that everything is in the right place. A lot of the things we talk about in the platform features and technical stuff already are included in those checklists, but they cover a lot more things than just those, especially if you're working on a game that might get released in 2 different generations of the same platform. For example, PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5, each one of them has different requirements for some things. So be aware of that. And one thing we can strongly recommend is to make internal checklists yourself to keep track of what you have to do for builds and release. Do this for every platform. There's a lot of moving pieces of what you have to do in order to release the game and consequent updates. So having a checklist will make things way easier. You have to keep track of things like ratings, changes in them, all the localizations for every platform, every region, the patches, the version numbers, the patch sizes, to name a few. So be constantly testing those requirements of the dev kits to make sure you won't have any surprises later on. Some platforms even include ways to automatically check some of the things you need to comply with directly into the dev kit. So yeah, take advantage of that. And most platforms, if not all by now, have some form of early testing. So you can send a build to start early checks on the requirements they have. Having those early checks done can be great to save some time at the end of the dev cycle when you're just trying to get through the finish line with the actual game and you don't want to be worrying about all the checks on some platforms. So be mindful of that. Try to do it if you can. We unfortunately found out about that very late on the dev cycle, so we really didn't took advantage of it, but we for sure will do it on the next game we release. And I can emphasize this enough, but platform certification is not a proper QA for the game. They will be checking that you are compliant with all their technical requirements, that the app doesn't crash, or more general things like that, but they won't be playing your game to find bugs. So plan your QA regardless. Don't expect for platform to do that QA for you. And another thing to be mindful also is keeping track of your combination of engine and platform SDKs versions. Some of the platform SDKs have a relatively small life cycle, so this might end up causing you to upgrade SDKs for a certain platform, and that in itself might involve changing the engine version as well. And you don't want to do that if you're close to release, as a new version of either the SDK or the engine could mean introducing bugs or unexpected behaviors that you haven't tested yet. So yeah, make sure to read through all the certification process for each platform, including, for example, how to schedule the testing, how to send the build to certification, if you need any waivers for the platform. Each step might take a little bit more time than you expect. So depending on the dates and if you get a build rejected or not, this might take from a week to a month. So just be aware of that when deciding when to release the game and your whole schedule for the dev. And also save your build somewhere. We're gonna talk a little more about this later on, but especially the ones that pass certification, because you will need those to make patches in some platforms.
Okay, so let's talk about marketing. As Brian mentioned, we are most technical, so this area was a struggle for us. But we tried our best to increase awareness for game during the development cycle, and this is what we did. Try to participate in as many events as you can, being digital or live, if your budget allows it. Our game was featured in the last edition of the Game Devs of Color Expo, DreamHack Beyond, the Indie Live Expo, Asobu Indie Showcase, just to name a few. Those events were focused on the Steam release, but we also had the chance to participate in the ID at Xbox Game Demo Winterfest a few months before release. And in 2022, we showcased the game at the Bitsumit Expo in Japan, which was an awesome experience. It was the first time showing the game live, and even with the language barrier, we enjoyed seeing people play our game and having fun with it. Potions Panic, the puzzle game of the collection, got so popular that we have to improvise a second station in our booth just to have that game running. And from this event, we got featured in Famitsu, and after the release, we managed to get a review on one of the printed editions of the magazine. We decided to have our release date announcement trailer as our main marketing effort. We partnered with a talented local artist, Carlos Jimenez, to work on an animated trailer for this. And he, along with our art team, did an amazing job. We got featured in both the PlayStation and the ID at Xbox YouTube channels, and that drove a lot of interest and initial sales on those platforms. So each platform that you will want to release has some requirements for marketing materials. Be sure to review them and take the time to implement its guidelines properly. We couldn't have everything ready to send over to Nintendo, so we didn't manage to get featured on any of their socials. And once you have all the material ready, be sure to contact each platform to see if you can get some sort of announcement on their socials on YouTube channels. And to finish up, take into account that you can also have localized marketing. Talk to the platforms about it. Check if you can get featured in different parts of the world. If you can send custom material. For example, if you wanna get featured in PlayStation Japan and not only in PlayStation America. So now that we mention it, let's check the trailer.
Okay, so that was the trailer. We hope you liked it. So, well, that was most of the advice we can give you before releasing the game. But yeah, I know we have covered a lot. But yeah, you just jump through all the hoops and finally release the game. Surely you can take some proper break and celebrate the incredible achievement that is getting the game out. And watching people play the game on their favorite platforms is amazing, but that doesn't mean it's over. So here's a couple of tips we learned after the game was released. First of all, and I think this one is a given, keep an eye on bugs for each platform. There's definitely going to be bugs that are affecting all of them, which are probably related to the game itself. But there's also some of them that might be affecting specific platforms. Like, for example, slow loading times on the Switch, certain achievement not unlocking for a certain platform. So we try to centralize a place to keep track of them. We use Jira, and I know a lot of people has strong opinions about using Jira. So don't worry, you can always use Trello or a similar task tracking tool. The important part is that you're aware of the of all the bugs and you keep them in a central place to keep track of them. And also after you get the game out of the door, you have to start thinking about patching it for bug fixes or any additional content you might want to add after release. All platforms have different processes for this, but some of them particularly require you to have at hand your previous patches and the initial release builds in order to be able to make a new patch. So just keep in mind that, try to keep them stored somewhere yourself. And don't worry if you for some reason lose them. You can contact the platform to sort it out, but this might affect your schedule for releasing certain patches. So you better store them yourself. And yeah, now that the game is out, you can keep applying to events to gain more exposure for it. Like there's still post-release marketing bits that you can take advantage of. So especially if you have plans on releasing new content or important updates, try to align those with certain events to have a bigger impact on marketing. And finally, also plan your discounts ahead of time. How much will you discount? How often can you discount on each platform? Is your discount part of a bigger event on the platform, or are you making an individual discount for your game itself? All these things will work better if you manage to plan them properly and align them with any update or other external factors that might affect the sales of the game. So yeah, these are our conclusions. This was definitely a learning experience for us. We learned a lot from this. Even having previous experience in ports, going through all the release management ourselves was definitely something new for us. A sim launch is definitely not the only option. Decide if you have the bandwidth to take a certain amount of platforms to release at the same time. You can always release on some of them later on, and that even gives you an extra marketing beat after the initial release. So consider if it's reasonable to try to push all of them at the same time. It's very important also to try to find support for things like localization and release management, especially if you have a very small team and you can take all of the load of work that you have to manage before release. I feel like we definitely hit several of the goals we had with the project, especially on the technical and release management side. Definitely, we're way better prepared to do this the next time. Yeah, we hope this was useful. We would love to know a lot of these things before releasing our game, and hopefully they will make it a little bit easier for you. And if you need some code development or release management help, feel free to reach out to us. So thank you for tuning in for our talk. And if you have any questions that you want to ask us later, you can contact us at our emails or our socials. Thank you so much to the Game Devs of Color Expo for this space. Thank you for tuning in. Muchas gracias. We hope this is gonna be useful for you.
Thank you so much for sharing that knowledge, Brian and Ricardo. That sounds like it was a heck of a project. But you came to the talk with so much energy. I hope that it means that you're doing well and have recovered and are ready for the next project. on maybe not as many platforms right off the bat. Genuinely, I appreciate that, like, you started off with, hey, maybe consider, if you're going to do a multi-platform launch, do you need to be on all of them? Consider which ones you would like to launch on. I think it's really easy when we're excited about a thing or feeling the pressure to make a thing succeed, that we feel like we have to do all of the things. We have to be on all of the platforms, and we have to be social on all of the media, and we have to talk to all of the people, and we have to go to all of the shows. And at the end of the day, we're each only one person. Maybe working on a team, sure, but still limited by the same 24-hour clock as everybody else. And we're working in an industry that is notorious for burnout, exploitation, layoffs. We have to take care of ourselves. Sustainability is going to be something that requires work and reflection and slowing down. And it's not to say that a multi-platform launch is not possible, but just consider, is this a good decision for me? Perhaps what is good for my game is what's good for me. That's how we get some of this veteran experience to stick around. That's how we have a more diverse, more inclusive game industry, is by protecting ourselves and protecting each other so that we can stay here long enough to make a space better for the folks who are inspired by our work and decide that they want to take on the Herculean task of making a game. So thank you for sharing that experience, and also those like concrete checklist takeaways that I know are going to save lives. Ryan and Ricardo, thank you so much. You can find Ricardo on Twitter at Rick to the Past, RIK to the Past. You can find Brian on Twitter at FuBraco, that's BRACO. All right, folks, that is our last speaker. We've got the closing ceremony to head over to. I'm just stealing a couple minutes to say thank you for being here, for watching the speakers, for participating with energy in the chat that I anticipate will be there, but because I'm recording this in the past, I can't promise it. But I know that every year y'all have made this show what it is by being a part of it, by sharing your energy, by helping lift each other up, connecting. It's what we need more of moving forward. Probably heard me reuse a few words over the course of the show: vulnerable and resonance, and I believe in genuine connection and trying to connect with genuine earnestness and trying to see the good opportunities and the good intentions in people, and recognize that good intentions are not always enough. They do count for something. And I hope that moving forward, we are able to continue lifting each other up and finding opportunities to change the broken parts of this system. Games are incredible. They've inspired me my entire the entire part of my life I can remember. It is I just realized, I was like, if 7-year-old me, if 9-year-old me knew that I would be hosting an expo for people of color who are developing games all around the world, like 9-year-old me would like lose his stuff. I'm not going to swear around 9-year-old me. And I think that, again, what ties us to games is our passion. And remembering that passion that hopefully brought us here, that hopefully inspires us to be here. I hope that it inspires us to continue being here in a way that does take care of us, that prioritizes the sustainability of our hearts and our minds over the profits of our companies or somebody's companies. This industry fundamentally needs change. We need to continue to organize. The massive numbers of layoffs and corporate extraction of profit and like it's not acceptable. And I'm glad to see organization. I'm glad to see alternative styles of studio formation. I'm glad to see people deciding that it's not worth breaking their souls, their spirits, their bodies to make these games. I think we make better games. We don't sacrifice ourselves to do it. So yeah, let's make better games the right way. Thanks again, folks. We'll see you at the closing show.